Before World War II turned the world into ashes, life was painfully ordinary. People woke up early, shops opened, children went to school, families argued over dinner and laughed over nothing. In small towns and big cities across Europe, no one believed their lives would soon be measured in sirens, ration cards, and survival. Martin, Anna, Jakob, Elise, names that never appeared in history books, lived simple lives. A baker kneaded dough before sunrise. A mother sewed clothes by the window. A boy dreamed of becoming a teacher. A girl practiced piano every evening. The world felt stable, but underneath that calm surface, tension was growing. The rumors. Newspapers spoke of politics. Radios whispered about borders, armies, and threats. Adults discussed war in low voices, believing children couldn't hear. Another war? People asked. No, not again. They were wrong. The last normal days. Markets were full. Trains ran on time. Cafes echoed with conversation. People complained about small things, prices, weather, work. They had no idea these would soon feel like luxuries. One old man said quietly in a cafe, "Enjoy peace. You never notice it until it's gone." No one listened. The shadow approaches. By the late 1930s, uniforms became common. Young men disappeared for training. Posters appeared on walls. Flags replaced advertisements. Children stopped playing war games for fun. War was becoming real. Still, most civilians believed, it won't reach us. History would approve how wrong they were. World War II did not begin with explosions for civilians. It began with denial, and when the bombs finally fell, millions would realize too late. Peace is fragile, and ordinary lives are the first victims of war. The sound came without warning. Not an explosion, not a gunshot, a scream, a long, rising, mechanical scream that cut through the air and froze every heart beneath it. Air raid sirens. At first, people didn't move. They stood in doorways. They looked up from their work. They stared at each other, confused. Some laughed nervously. Probably just a drill. It wasn't. The first moments of panic. Then the second siren wailed. Louder, closer, angrier. Mothers grabbed children. Shopkeepers abandoned their counters. Old men struggled to stand as the sound echoed between buildings. Someone shouted, "To the shelters, now!" That word, shelter, was new to civilian life. Minutes ago, these streets had been normal. Now they were battlegrounds waiting for bombs. Running without knowing where. People ran without direction. Shoes were lost. Bags were dropped. Children cried, unable to understand why the sky had suddenly become dangerous. Martin, only 12 years old, clutched his sister's hand so tightly her fingers turned white. His mother pushed them forward, her face pale, her breath short. She kept whispering, "Don't look up, don't look up." But everyone looked up. The bombs fall. At first there was silence, then a distant whistle, a sound that grew sharper with every second. Boom! The ground shook. Windows shattered like ice. Walls cracked. The street twisted under their feet. People screamed. Another bomb fell. Then another. The sky had turned against them. Inside the shelters, basements, underground stations, makeshift bunkers. Civilians packed together like strangers on a sinking ship. The air smelled of sweat, dust, fear. Babies cried endlessly. Old women prayed. Men sat in silence, fists clenched, powerless. Each explosion above felt closer than the last. Dust fell from the ceiling. Someone whispered, "Are we buried?" No one answered. Time lost underground. Minutes felt like hours. Every second stretched painfully. People counted explosions instead of time. 1, 2, 3. A young girl asked her mother, "Will our house still be there?" Her mother didn't know. She lied anyway. Yes. When the sirens stopped, eventually the screaming sky fell silent. No one moved. They waited. Slowly, cautiously, people emerged. What they saw would haunt them forever. The aftermath. Buildings torn open like broken bones. Streets buried under rubble. Smoke rising where homes once stood. A man knelt beside ruins, calling his wife's name. A child stared at the place where his school had been. Firefighters dug with bare hands. This wasn't a battlefield. This was home. The realization. That day, civilians learned a brutal truth. War does not ask who you are. War does not care if you are innocent. War does not spare those who do not fight. From that moment on, life was divided into two parts. Before the sirens, after the sirens. When the bombs stopped falling, people believed the worst was over. They were wrong, because war does not only arrive with explosions, it stays with hunger. The disappearing food. At first, shops still opened. Bread was available. Milk arrived in the mornings. Markets looked almost normal. But then shelves started emptying. One day, sugar vanished. The next week, meat. Soon after, butter, eggs, oil. People whispered in queues. The trains aren't coming. War had swallowed the supply lines. Ration cards. Survival on paper. Soon, everyone received them. Small paper cards. Stamped, numbered, strict. Ration cards decided how much you deserved to eat, not how hungry you were. Adults stared at numbers printed in ink. Bread, limited. Meat, once a week. Sugar, barely anything. Children got slightly more. Mothers pretended they weren't hungry. Long lines, short tempers. Before sunrise, people lined up outside bakeries. Cold mornings, empty stomachs. Someone always tried to cut the line. Arguments broke out. Sometimes fists followed, but mostly silence. Hunger makes people quiet. Martin stood beside his mother, holding ration cards like they were gold. When the bakery door opened, the smell of fresh bread felt like torture. When it was their turn, the baker handed them a loaf. Small, hard, barely enough. That loaf had to last 3 days. Blackout nights. When evening came, another rule followed. Lights out. Windows covered with black cloth. No lamps. No candles visible. Cities turned into shadows. One small light could bring bombs. Families ate dinner in darkness. The sound of chewing felt too loud. Outside, soldiers patrolled streets, shouting orders. Lights out. Complete blackout. Fear ruled the night. Making food from nothing. People became creative. Soup from potato peels. Bread stretched with sawdust and grains. Meat replaced with turnips. Children learned new tastes and learned to hate them. Martin's sister once asked, "Is this food or pretending?" No one laughed. The weak and the old. Hunger chose its victims carefully. Old people weakened first. Children grew thinner. Clothes hung loosely. Cheeks sank in. Doctors had no medicine. Hospitals had no supplies. People didn't die loudly. They faded. The moral struggle. Some stole. From farms. From stores. From neighbors. Others traded family heirlooms for food. A gold ring for a bag of potatoes. A wedding watch for a loaf of bread. Dignity became currency. The war inside homes. Arguments replaced laughter. Parents fought over crumbs. Children cried from hunger. The war had entered kitchens, bedrooms, and hearts. Not with bombs, but with emptiness. The lesson of Chapter 3. Civilians learned another truth. War does not need weapons to kill. Hunger is enough. Every bite became a victory. Every meal, survival. And still, the war continued. War did not ask children for permission. It simply took their childhood. When schools went silent, before the war, mornings belonged to bells, books, and laughter. Now, silence. Schools were bombed, burned, or turned into hospitals and barracks. Classrooms became shelters. Blackboards became walls of names. Missing, wounded, dead. Teachers disappeared. Some were drafted. Some were killed. Some never returned. Children stopped learning letters. They learned directions to shelters instead. Games turned into drills. Children still played, but not like before. They played air raid. One child shouted, "Sirens!" Others ran for cover. They knew the sound of planes better than songs. Toy soldiers felt real. Too real. Hunger shrank bodies and dreams. Food shortages hit children hardest. Ribs showed through skin. Faces looked older than years allowed. Mothers gave their portions to children. Fathers pretended they had eaten. Children learned guilt before joy. Martin watched his little sister sleep longer each day. Not from tiredness, but from weakness. Child labor. War took their hands. Factories needed workers. Teenagers became adults overnight. Boys carried ammunition. Girls worked in fields and factories. Some forged documents to work earlier. Small hands handled dangerous machines. Injuries were common. Complaints were not allowed. Orphans of bombings. Bombs did not choose targets carefully. One night, parents were there. The next, gone. Children wandered streets holding photographs, names written on scraps of paper, hoping someone recognized them. Many never found family again. Orphanages overflowed. So did the streets. Fear became normal. Children stopped crying at explosions. They stopped screaming. They watched. They learned how close a bomb had to fall to kill. They learned which buildings were safer. They learned where to hide bodies. No child should know these things. The loss of innocence. A boy of 10 said, "I'm not scared anymore." That was not bravery. That was damage. Girls stopped dreaming of dolls. Boys stopped dreaming of games. They dreamed of survival. The war after war. Even when bombs stopped, childhood did not return. Nightmares stayed. Silence followed them into adulthood. Some never spoke about it again. The war ended on paper, not in minds. The lesson of Chapter 4. Children survived WWII, but many never truly lived again. War does not only kill bodies, it kills futures. When men went to war, the world did not stop. Women held it together. Empty homes. Heavy silence. One morning, husbands and sons left. Uniforms on. Kisses rushed. Promises uncertain. Doors closed behind them. Women stood alone in kitchens, holding letters that might become the last memory they ever received. They had no time to grieve. Survival demanded strength. The rise of women workers. Factories reopened with new faces. Women replaced men at machines. They built weapons they hoped would protect their families. They worked 12-hour shifts with aching backs and bleeding hands. Posters called them heroes. Reality gave them exhaustion. Mistakes meant explosions. Fear meant nothing. Fields without farmers. In villages, women plowed fields. Hands that once cradled children now handled tools. They harvested crops under threat of air raids. Some slept in barns. Some guarded farms with pitchforks. Food had to grow, no matter the cost. Mothers at war. Mothers fought a different battle. They rationed food. They hid fear. They lied to children. Father will come home soon, even when letters stopped coming. Children watched their mothers cry silently at night, never in front of them. Women and loss. Bombs did not spare women. Mothers dug children out of rubble. Wives searched hospitals and morgues. Sisters waited for news that never came. Grief became routine. Tears were swallowed. Resistance and courage. Some women fought back. They hid refugees, smuggled food, passed messages, sabotaged supplies. If caught, torture, prison, death. They did it anyway. Abuse and silence. War exposed women to horrors rarely spoken aloud. Occupation brought fear, powerlessness, violence hidden behind silence. Many survived, but carried scars no one could see. History often skipped these pages. The war after the war. When peace returned, women were told, "Go back to normal." But normal was gone. They had become providers, protectors, survivors, and yet forgotten. The lesson of Chapter 5. Wars are remembered for soldiers, but survival belonged to women. Without them, there would have been nothing left to return to. They did not march in parades. They did not wear medals, but they carried the war and the world on their backs. The day the enemy arrived, the war changed its face. It no longer fell from the sky. It stood in the streets. The moment control was lost. Boots echoed on stone roads. Flags were raised where others once flew. Languages changed overnight. Orders replaced laws. Civilians watched from windows as foreign soldiers marched through their cities. Organized, armed, silent. There was no battle, just surrender. New rules, new fears. Curfews were announced. Movement restricted. Radios confiscated. Posters covered walls. Obey. Report. Do not resist. Punishment was public. Fear was deliberate. The daily humiliation. People showed papers everywhere. Homes were searched. Food was taken. Men were questioned. Women were watched. A knock at the door meant panic. No one knew why they were chosen, or if they would return. Collaborators and survival. Some cooperated, not always from loyalty, but hunger. They translated orders, guided patrols, pointed fingers. Neighbors stopped trusting neighbors. Silence became safer than honesty. The resistance in shadows. Others resisted. Quietly, a missing sign, a sabotaged vehicle, a whispered message passed in a bakery. Resistance fighters were teachers, shopkeepers, teenagers. If caught, execution. Still, they fought. Public punishment. To control many, punish one. People were hanged in squares. Names read aloud. Bodies left as warnings. Civilians were forced to watch. Children learned fear early. Women and occupation. Women faced constant danger. Searches, threats, exploitation. Some used courage as weapon. Hiding resistance members, smuggling food, passing messages in plain sight. They lived between terror and bravery. The slow death of normal life. Music disappeared. Laughter became rare. Even weddings felt like funerals. Time moved slowly. Hope became illegal. The lesson of Chapter 6. Occupation does not need bombs. It kills dignity first. Freedom next. Humanity last. Cities still stood, but they no longer belonged to the people who lived in them. The most terrifying enemy in the war could not be seen, only heard. The sound that froze blood. It always began the same way. A distant hum, growing louder. People stopped moving. Conversations died. Hearts raced. Then the sirens screamed. Panic and practice. Families grabbed coats, documents, children. Some prayed. Some shouted. Some ran. Streets filled with bodies moving in one direction. Underground. Air raid shelters became second homes. Dark, damp, overcrowded. People counted seconds between explosions. The waiting. Bombs fell like rain. The ground shook, walls cracked, air vanished. Children screamed. Adults lied. It will be over soon. No one knew. Every blast asked the same question. Is this the one? Cities burned. When the bombing stopped, cities were unrecognizable. Fires spread faster than help. Buildings collapsed. People searched rubble for voices. Many found silence. Entire streets vanished in one night. The choice of targets. Factories, railways, homes. Bombs did not care. Civilians learned a cruel truth. There was no safe place. Surviving meant living with death. Some shelters collapsed. Some people suffocated. Some burned. Survivors carried guilt. Why not me? Names were whispered. Lists grew longer. Children of the sirens. Children could tell aircraft by sound. They slept dressed. They dreamed of explosions. Peace felt unfamiliar. The lesson of Chapter 7. War from the sky erased borders between soldier and civilian. Everyone became a target. When the sirens fell silent, the world above was never the same again. When the war reached the front door, people did the only thing left. They ran. The moment home stopped being safe. It usually happened suddenly. A rumor, a gunshot, a distant explosion getting closer. Someone shouted, "They're coming." That was enough. Homes were abandoned in minutes. Food left on tables. Doors left open. People grabbed what they could carry and left everything else behind. The beginning of the road. Roads filled with humanity. Carts pulled by old men. Women carrying children. Teenagers leading siblings. No destination. Only distance from danger. Cities emptied. Villages vanished. The road became life. What people carried. Not much. A blanket. A photograph. Some bread. A pot. Everything else. Years of work, memories, identity, was left to be destroyed. Some carried keys to homes they would never see again. The dangers of flight. Refugees were not safe. Planes attacked roads. Soldiers stopped columns. Cold, hunger, disease followed closely. Children collapsed. Elderly fell behind. Sometimes there was no time to stop. The road showed no mercy. Nights without shelter. People slept in fields, under trees, in ruins. Rain-soaked clothes. Cold bit bones. Crying babies gave away positions. Mothers covered mouths to save lives. Sleep became impossible. The loss of family. In chaos, hands slipped apart. A child lost. A parent disappeared. A scream swallowed by movement. Some searched forever. Some never stopped asking, "Have you seen my son?" Most answers were silence. Strangers became family. On the road, strangers shared food. One potato split 3 ways. One blanket for many. Humanity survived, even when the world collapsed. Arrival without arrival. Refugees reached camps, or towns already full, or nowhere at all. They were alive, but homeless, stateless, broken. War had turned them into shadows. The lesson of Chapter 8. War does not only destroy cities, it erases belonging. A refugee carries the weight of a home that no longer exists. The road kept moving forward, but many hearts were left behind. The war was ending. The guns fell silent. The planes stopped screaming. The bombs ceased, and yet silence was heavier than noise. Streets of ghosts. Cities were empty. Once bustling streets were lined with rubble. Shattered windows reflected the pale sunlight. Smoke drifted lazily from ruins. Civilians wandered aimlessly, some in shock, some searching, some praying for anyone they had lost. No one spoke much. The echo of explosions still filled minds. Reuniting and recognizing loss. Families searched for each other. Martin ran through streets calling names. Children held photographs and cried silently. Mothers hugged children they thought were dead. Some reunions were joyful, others were impossible. Grief was everywhere. The slow return to normality. Bread returned. Milk trickled in. Trains started moving, but nothing was the same. Schools had to be rebuilt. Factories reopened. Homes reconstructed. People tried to laugh, but memories of hunger, sirens, and loss stayed. The moral scars. Even with the war over, trauma remained. Silent nights carried whispers of lost friends. Every shadow reminded people of soldiers, bombs, or executions. Some walked streets repeatedly, checking rubble for familiar faces. Adults felt guilt for surviving. Children had grown up too fast. The old were the only ones left unchanged, but they mourned the young. The question of justice. Liberation did not erase pain. Civilians wondered, who pays for this? Who punished the guilty? Who remembers the lost? Some took revenge. Some forgave. Most just survived, carrying memories like stones in their pockets. Hope amid destruction. Amid ruins, small signs of hope appeared. A flower sprouting in a crater. Children drawing on rubble with chalk. Neighbors sharing food again. Life whispered, "We may continue." The lesson of Chapter 9. War ends on paper, but in hearts it never truly ends. Survival is not only living, it is remembering. It is rebuilding. It is learning to hope despite everything. End of Chapter 9. The world began to heal slowly, but every shadow, every scar, every silence told a story that would never be forgotten. Years had passed since the last bomb fell. Smoke no longer drifted across towns. The silence now carried a new sound, cautious hope. Returning to life, Martin walked through the streets of his old town. Buildings had been rebuilt, trees replanted. The sky seemed wider, softer. People worked again. Bakers kneaded dough. Shops opened. Children laughed. A sound almost forgotten. It was not the same world. It could never be, but it was alive. Faces of survivors. Survivors walked with a new awareness. Eyes were sharper, hearts heavier, hands steadier. They carried memories like metals invisible to the world. Every laugh was layered with past tears. Every hug had survived fear, starvation, and loss. The return of childhood. Children who had known sirens and rubble learned to play again. Games filled the streets. Pianos returned to homes. School bells rang. Martin smiled, watching the next generation. They would not know hunger like he did. They would not know constant fear. For them, the world had been given a second chance. The role of women and families. Mothers who had carried families now watched as new life emerged. Their sacrifices became invisible threads holding society together. Factories, fields, and homes were rebuilt not by governments alone, but by their unwavering hands. Families reunited, though some faces would never be found. Memories of lost ones remained, but the living carried them forward, telling stories so history would not forget. The lesson of survival. War left scars. It left ruins. It left questions. But it also left resilience. Human beings learned to endure hunger, to survive fear, to rebuild what was lost. They learned that life is precious because it is fragile, and that peace is a gift earned through pain. Reflections on the past. Martin stood by a small monument in the town square, a stone marking the lives lost. He thought of the sirens, the hunger, the running on roads with nothing but hope. He thought of the mothers, the women, the teachers, the children, the strangers who became family. And he realized Survival was only the beginning. Rebuilding, remembering, and passing on lessons was the true victory. The enduring human spirit. Even when cities crumble, even when bombs fall, even when starvation gnaws and darkness surrounds, humans rise. They create, they love, they protect, they hope. The world remembers not only those who fought with guns, but those who fought to live, to care, to endure. The legacy of WWII civilians. The war is over. The sky is clear. The streets are alive. The children play. History may honor generals, victories, and strategies, but the true story of WWII belongs to the civilians, the ordinary men, women, and children who survived unimaginable horror and lived to rebuild a shattered world. From ashes and rubble, life emerged, and the human spirit proved indestructible.